This is Rich Straffolino with the Department of No. Andrew Storm, Security Engineering at Kilo Code. I got to ask, what is your priority this week?
More LinkedIn.
More, you're just networking, you're connecting.
I got a network. It's the time. I haven't done it in a little while. It's time to reach out, check out what's going on with folks.
You gotta fire up Claude, write some AI written posts just to fit in. Yeah. This is.
Make sure you tell it no M dash is allowed.
But plenty of emojis. You gotta have smileys and books and stuff like that. I like it. I like where your mind's at. Eduardo Ortiz, VP and Global Head of Cybersecurity at Tectonic Industries. What is your priority this week?
Finalizing my plans on my next international trip.
Another example where, hey, maybe we could use some AI for that. That's nice, though. Heading international. Always a fun time.
Yep.
Always a fun time. All right, producer Josh, let's run that opening. Let's get into the show.
From the CISO series, it's Department of No.
Welcome to the Department of No, your virtual strategy meeting. It's big, it's glorious, it's live, and all that entails. We love that you're here, you're joining us, and I can't wait to get into the news of today. I also can't wait to remind you who our sponsor for today is, and that is Conveyor. Remember, you can get involved in our YouTube chat live if you are joining us on the stream. Remember, we broadcast every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, so make sure you're joining us, or shoot us an email, feedback@cisoseries.com. We'd love to hear from you. Remember, just a quick, before we jump into the news, the opinions expressed here by our guests are in fact their own and not necessarily those of anyone else. We've got about 30 minutes though, so plenty of news today. You'd be shockingly, there's cybersecurity news today. Who would have guessed? Let's jump into it with our No or No segment. This is where we need to know if this news is something that you need to bring to your security teams. You need to be, learning the lessons from, or is this, hey, nice headline, maybe interesting story, but don't need to know anything more about this. First up here, Cal.com abandons open source. The open source project Cal.com is shifting its core scheduling platform to a proprietary model due to rising security risks from AI tools that can quickly analyze public code to find vulnerabilities. That's what they're saying. Cal will maintain a separate open source version for hobbyists. Transparency proving too risky for software projects. Andrew, for you, do you want to know a little more about this, or is this no thank you for you?
I do. I was also a little sad by it at the same time when there was a great quote from CEO. He said something like, they want to be a scheduling company, not a cybersecurity company. I get that perspective. It kind of made me sad. Like, I would like to see every company do their part for cybersecurity. So I get where he's coming from, but I was not so sure about that response.
Eduardo, what about for you? I heard you laughing there.
Well, yeah. Well, that quote, you read the story. Probably I didn't finish reading the story, but I will say that quote, it's a whole story in one sentence, right? It's a signal that will resonate across the entire cybersecurity industry. For me, it's a no, KNOW, and I'm going to spell it out because of my accent. But when a company concludes that, in this case, open source transparency has become a liability because AI makes that vulnerability discovery too easy, I think that's going to change the risk calculation for every team out there that depends on open source components, right? So it's if vendors start going dark, your S1 strategy is going to get a lot harder, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting, the thought that the black box will save us. I don't know. I think we're going to talk about some stories here that kind of might make that. I don't know. I can see both sides of it for sure. I don't envy anybody that's that's releasing software in the current landscape, and we will get into more details why later in the show here. Our next No or No story, Minnesota calls in the National Guard after a cyber attack. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz sent in the National Guard to Winona County, citing a cyber attack that caused significant disruptions. The Guard will help ensure vital municipal services continue without interruption. County officials are working with the FBI and state IT services to recover. This follows also a ransomware attack that same county suffered back in January. It's not clear if these two are related or separate incidences. But Eduardo, let me start with you. You're calling in the military to respond to a cyber attack. You want to know a little more about this, or no thank you for you?
No thank you. It's the National Guard angle. It's a headline grabber in my case, right? It's it's a county government that was disrupted badly enough that civilian IT was overwhelmed, or external cyber support it's needed, right? For us in the private side, the parallel in this case will not be government. It will be more of if your area retainer and your internal capacity can handle a sustained ransomware event without needing to call in reinforcements, right? That's probably the angle that I will think, but it's a no to discuss with the team. Like, we should be ready.
Andrew, what about for you? Do you want to know a little more about this, or are you with Eduardo here?
I think it's more of a footnote kind of thing where you look at that title and you think, did he deploy National Guard with guns in front of server rooms kind of thing? And it's not the case. It's the footnote of, guess what? They have a cyber team that can help you with incidents like this. So good to know. Let's move on to the next, I would say.
Oh, I'm sorry. And Scott Dorr rightly points out this was the city of Winona, which is in the county of Winona. So more specificity. But thank you, Scott, for that. I do appreciate you letting me know about that. Yeah, Andrew, I think footnote is yes, Eduardo, yes.
Well, Andrew brought up a point that probably I'm not fully aware, but the National Guard has cyber teams, right? Is that what you said?
They do, yeah.
Yes.
And probably most people don't know about it. Like I'm not clear about that, to be honest, on my side. But was that equivalent call for reinforcement look like in our organization, right? Like I'm going back to what I said before. It's kind of like how we actually tested that escalation path. In this case, it's having that cyber team. Do we have something similar on our side? So it's a no, but like you said, it makes you think about, is this happened to me? Am I ready? Which we all think about this all the time.
Yeah, and Andrew, I think a footnote to me is kind of where I'm at with this, whereas this is a legitimate policy response. It's not the ideal one you want, but like this is a card that they can play. And I think that's important for the public. Again, like most people don't know that.
I think too, there's an analogy, which is on the private side, we usually contract with incident response companies to help us out. And for an organization that's a government organization, they need something as well. And this is one option for them.
All right, next up here, 2 new ways to mess with AI. Google DeepMind researchers identified a new class of AI agent traps where malicious web content manipulates autonomous AI agents into leaking data, spreading misinformation, or executing unintended actions. The team outlined 6 attack categories, including hidden prompt injections, semantic manipulation, memory poisoning, and system-level coordination attacks that exploit how agents process content and follow instructions. Then, Manifold Security found that by setting a fake author name and email in Git, the research team could fool Claude and make a commit appear to originate from a trusted source, and then passed it through an automated review flow where the model approved it. Andrew, for you, are either one of these something you need to know more about and dig into, or are they no thanks for you?
I'm kind of the shrug on this one. Hidden gifts have been around for a while. It's basically the same thing. Fun research to read, but I didn't really find it actionable for me.
Eduardo, what about for you? Is this something you want to dig into a little bit on either one of these, or is it a no thank you for you too?
No, actually, I would like to know more, because you reading even that whole segment of the news was confusing for me, right? Like this is an area that I actually try to stay away from, because I have professionals that, people in my team that dedicate themselves to do this. But what I learned from this is, like, you have probably what I grasp from your take on it. It's like 2 different attack surfaces. What AI systems be manipulated through the content they process, and then the Git forgery finding, kind of like if it's chart for engineering organizations, right? It's if our development pipeline uses AI assisted code review, an attacker doesn't need to compromise that reviewer, but they just need to manipulate what the reviewer sees, right? So for me, that's kind of like a new category of software supply chain risk that didn't exist 2 years ago. So we're kind of like, I would like to know more in order to see how this AI assisted code review or agentic automation is in our development pipeline, right? And how do we implement that human review around these high risk approvals? And it can develop into a long conversation with our teams.
Yeah, and this is something actually we were digging into a lot of these subjects on our Super Cyber Friday we just had today, all about hacking trust in AI, which very fascinating. So if you want to see the replay for that, look at CISOseries.com for more information on that. But yeah, definitely those kind of like on the spectrum of trust, right? I was saying it in the chat that we put humans on the spectrum too, right? Like Andrew, to your point, like, Git forgeries like that aren't anything new. It's just that we assume that these systems can be more infallible than perhaps they are. So something to keep in mind for sure. And our last know or no story, NIST's NVD changes vulnerability assessment rules. NIST announced changes coming to the National Vulnerability Database to address its ongoing backlog. We've known about this. They've been struggling with this for a couple of years now. There's been budget stoppages that have caused this, just the explosion of vulnerabilities. But data analysis on vulnerabilities will now shift to a risk-based approach that will guide how they prioritize which CVE to process and enrich first. This change will include dropping enrichment for all vulnerabilities reported before March 1st, 2026, and will retain prioritization of CISA's known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. Eduardo, for you, solving the backlog by doing less, do you want to know a little more about this, or is this all right, at least they have a plan? What do you think about this story?
I would like to know more about it because, like you said, solving the backlog by doing less, I think it's a pragmatic call under resource pressure, right? I think it's the blast radius of this is going to hit the security teams that are small, like the small security teams the hardest. Because if your vulnerability management program relies on NVD enrichment to contextualize CVEs, severity scores, the affected products, all the, the patch guidance that you have, you probably lost that signal for a large swath of a lot of historical vulnerabilities that exist for many years, right? So the KEV carve out helps in this case, but it's it's kind of like a very narrow safety net for these teams. So I would like to know more how this is going to affect us.
Andrew, what about for you? What does anything strike you about this story, or is it a shrug for you?
I think they basically declared inbox zero and said, we don't have the money to do it. So this is one way to solve that problem. I get it. And I think saying that they're a year or more behind is being nice from where they've been. And it's a struggle for them. And same as Eduardo, the people who are going to be most hurt are the smaller orgs who can't pay for custom private feeds and that information, or the staff to do that for them. And so I look at it a little bit different, which is, your supply chain is only strong as the weakest link. And so long as we continue to rely on these smaller companies, we don't support them, that supply chain just can continue to devolve into something we don't want it to be.
Yeah, that the specter of that fragmentation, is and fragmentation that not everybody can kind of enjoy equally. Yeah, that's not something I'm looking forward to. So
one thing like that, legacy vulnerabilities, it's exactly what most attackers are looking to use nowadays, right? Like even that, this whole Mythos thing, and I don't know how many years old vulnerability was exploited, 27 years or something like that. I don't remember, but how do we compensate for that blind spot moving forward, right? Because legacy, everyone has tech debt.
And KVE just added a 12-year-old Visual Basic vulnerability that was under active exploitation this week. So, hey, at least that'll get enriched. So we know that now. So we're happy. Also, the the response to that one is apply the patch that was released 12 years ago. Also. All right, before we move on to our deeper discussion here, don't worry, folks, we got some Mythos news to cover here. We have to spend a few moments and thank our sponsor for today, and that is Conveyor. Happy Friday. Hope there isn't a fresh security questionnaire sitting in your inbox right now. If there is, here's something worth knowing. The teams that have fully automated their customer security reviews didn't just get a better trust center. They switched to an AI platform built for the whole workflow. Conveyor handles Trust Center, questionnaire automation, and self-serve for sales all in one place, with AI keeping the knowledge base current so answers are always accurate. Learn why enterprise SaaS teams choose Conveyor at conveyor.com. Max in our chat here is saying, is NVD even going to matter anymore with Mythos? Let's dig into it. Maybe we can answer your question there, Max. So we have some Mythos fallout here. Last week, obviously, we had the announcement of early access to Mythos Preview, Anthropic's latest model that's making some bold claims about vulnerability discovery, among other functions that it can do. This is still a tightly controlled model, but we've got some early findings. The AI Security Institute released reports that Mythos successfully completed advanced capture the flag tasks at a rate higher than other models and autonomously executed a multi-step attack simulation that previously required days of human work and had never been completed before by an LLM. It was really good at chaining things together, it seems. It seems being also just labeled a supply chain risk. The U.S. government is looking to get early Mythos access, with Treasury, Commerce, and various congressional committees reportedly in talks with Anthropic. We'll see how that develops. And not to be outdone, OpenAI is rolling out GPT 5.4 Cyber to a limited group of trusted users to help identify software vulnerabilities, expanding access from hundreds to thousands in the coming weeks as part of its Trusted Access for Cyber program here. Obviously, Mythos has been sucking the oxygen out of almost every other cybersecurity conversation since it was announced. I'm curious, Andrew, from your perspective, how do we rate this level of attention versus potential impact for Mythos? And for anybody not blessed with early access, how are we supposed to get ready for what we're hearing that Mythos could be capable of once it hits the streets?
OMG is what I've done a lot of talking people off the cliff this week about this, and the way I usually bring them a little bit step down, which is take a history lesson. Like we've seen this. Phones were a real big risk. We almost jumped off the cliff. Internet, the web, laptops, smartphones, mobile, cloud, AI, right? We've I've been in this game since the early 90s. I've seen all that and I felt it. So I tried to bring a little step of breathe and understand now, think about the value and the opportunity that this can bring. Yes, absolutely acknowledge dual use technology is a concern, but there's also a lot of upside to it. And so just like the person who commented in chat of, do we really need NVD anymore if we have an AI thing that we trust doing it? Great question right now. I'll add to that the value of we're seeing now two competitors in this space. And we should be really happy because if we only saw one entity doing this, that would be more of a problem than two. And all of us as security professionals get to take advantage of two really big, well-funded companies building a thing and competing over it that we all get to use at the end of the day. Hopefully we get our hands on it soon. Let's say that and get to use it.
Eduardo, where is your mind at with all the Mythos hype / dread / perhaps, hey, we don't need NV, with AI, everything is either dystopia or utopia. I get, where are you finding yourself on that spectrum?
I think I'm with Andrew on this one, right? The nation states historically, and any type of well-funded adversary, right? And no longer nation state, but I think that layer has been lowered, or that barrier of entry has been lowered now within the last, year or in the last few months, right? They're not waiting for a controlled release in this case for Mythos or this and that, or these models are being developed in parallel, and everyone, you're going to have that AI exploitation help, and it's a near-term offensive reality in this case for us, regardless of how Anthropic provides that access control in for specific people. So I think the impact on our side, it's going to be more of a how do we the attack chain complexity that previously require a lot of skilled human operators is now pretty much automated, right? Or it's partially automated. So our detection and response, and I've been thinking about, IOCs versus behavioral shift, right? Like we actually used to think a lot in IOCs and IOCs. Now it's like, okay, this behavior shift, it's like we have to think more about behavior. I was talking to a CEO yesterday of one of these AI companies, and he actually mentioned that, right? Our detection and response dwell time needs to be revised, right? And I think, regardless, this is actually a very interesting time because this keeps changing every day. It's like I bet you tomorrow we're going to have a different take on the Mythos thing, right? There was a new release. Overnight, I woke up to some news that there's a new cloud release on other release.
Oh yeah, Opus 4.7, I think. Yeah.
So it keeps changing, right? So in our case, it's like I think we need to start prioritizing our attack surface reduction right now. Kind of like reduce whatever we know of exposed legacy systems that we have in place, accelerate our patch cycles in a way that any type of internet-facing assets, if we have an SLA of 48 hours, well, is that enough? Nowadays, like whatever you have in place, you need to start revising that against this new threat posture. Like I think our cybersecurity posture has to change rapidly, given what's happening. That's my take on this, right?
Okay, I like this. This is like, Andrew, I like your take of this could be bad, but we've also dealt with unknown bad before. And I think that's kind of the general, should be the general a moment of clarity, right? With AI, the kind of AI, we saw this with Gen AI too, is that this is not the first fundamental technology shift that we have had to deal with as cybersecurity as an industry. Not to say that we've done it well with the other ones, but companies still exist, business still gets done. Again, not saying there won't be blood, sweat, and tears in the interim, right? I think Phil Venerables had a really great quote where he was basically saying there's the potential here for enormous short-term pain, but long-term, this makes him incredibly optimistic about where we could get to in cybersecurity, what these tools can do once we weather potentially this kind of initial storm. So I'm interested to see how this conversation shifts. I mean, Eduardo, to your point, next month, tomorrow, 48. It's the landscape is shifting so quickly that it's almost impossible to kind of prognosticate at this point.
I think too, though, Rich, something that Eduardo said, which was getting yourself ready for the new paradigm of today. If you look in that AI Security Institute report, they actually clawed out very clearly, which was there's no penalty in the undertaking. So meaning that LLMs just hammered the heck out of it, not taking into account there could be alerting systems, there could be humans going to do something, there could be an automated AI agent that would detect it and stop it. So again, we need to prepare for it, but we also need to take what we're given into perspective of it's not the end of the world. We can handle this one too.
Yeah, to finalize, I think, unless we can talk about this for hours, but at what point do we start treating this as emerging and start treating it as the new baseline for us, right? Because we keep saying emerging technologies, emerging this, emerging AI. Should we start treating it as our new baseline and start getting ready ahead of time? And, adopt it as this is, because there's a lot of future statements in all these things, but, let's start bringing this as our new baseline. I think it'll be interesting to see.
We're going to continue on with the kind of the supply chain risk conversation here with our next story here. Open source tool attacks reveal the future of supply chain compromise. This comes from a featured article in the Register this week, looking at the future of supply chain attacks. We've saw two recent attacks here that we've talked about on the show previously. The North Korea linked Axios attack and the other one on Trivy, which is associated with Team PCP, quality hacker name, folks. The attacks infected open source tools with malware and used this access to steal secrets of tens of thousands of organizations. Mandiant Consulting CTO Charles Carmichael, speaking to the Register, said the data that was taken a few weeks ago will likely be leveraged this week, next month, probably for several months, and the blast radius will continue to expand. Eduardo, I know the default reaction we see for a lot of these kind of supply chain threats, at least traditionally up until, a couple of days ago, was we need S-bombs, we need more S-bombs, we need better S-bombs. But I feel like if it was that easy, we then wouldn't have these problems. I'm curious, do you feel like organizations, even before Mythos here, have they been taking software supply chain as seriously? Is this still underappreciated as an attack surface, or are we now all being forced to kind of recognize what it is at the same time?
The S-bomb, that S-bomb take, it's understandable, but it's probably insufficient here, right? I think again, going back to basic, knowing what's in your software doesn't help you if the tool itself gets compromised after you inventory it. what these attacks are exposing, it's a trust model problem. Organizations either extend implicit trust to open source tools at install time, but then we have limited continuous monitoring of what those tools are, going to be doing at runtime, right? So the framing, it's like, where do we go from here? Like how the these compromise are going to affect us in the future? From I think we're very reliant on open source tools. So as SPONs will tell us what software we have, but do they tell you what the software is doing at runtime, what it has access to, whether it's been silently updated to steal your credentials, right? If your answer is yes or no, but if it's no, what's the next layer of supply chain defense look like? And then you keep going down that path. It's I think it opens a lot of questions as we move forward with the open source tool set.
Yeah, and kind of in some ways ties back into pretty much every story we talked about today. But Andrew, I'm curious for you, how did this kind of state of software supply chain attack surface, like how did this strike you?
I think well, first of all, in terms of the SBOM, right? The SBOM is right of boom, meaning, yeah, it's going to tell you. I'm sorry, I used to work in that space where we talked about left and right of boom, but it's going to tell you, if we take the SBOM example, if it's a recipe of what goes in the cake, it will tell you after the fact that you had bad sugar in there. It's not going to tell you before you eat the cake that it has bad sugar. You're not going to know it's bad until the bad happens. That's what I mean by it's right up, boom, right? So I mean, yes, absolutely. If you know something is vulnerable, you can look at the SBOMs and say, what in my entire ecosystem enterprise is affected by that? Yes, helpful. It's not going to prevent things like this from happening. And we're going to continue to see that supply chain getting hit, and centralized tools like Trivy, it's a gold mine, right? If you get in there and it's using tens of thousands, yeah, I would be targeting it too if that was my job in life. So and like I said earlier, it's only the supply chain's only as strong as the weakest link. And so if everybody uses the same thing and it has a weakness, then everybody potentially can be compromised by it.
All right, we're going to finish up here. One of our favorite stories here we always talk about is kind of the state of critical infrastructure here. Well, we saw two major infrastructure breach stories this week. One saw attackers accessing the control interface of the pump systems in Venice, Italy. The attackers using names like Infrastructure Destruction Squad and Dark Engine. Again, kudos. Whoever's naming these groups, great job.
Good marketing.
Said in a Chinese language Telegram post that their goal was to expose critical infrastructure weaknesses and offered to sell full root access to the system for just $600, which I would lose a Price is Right game if I had to guess how expensive that was. Then U.S. agencies, including the FBI, CISA, and the NSA, say that Iranian-linked attackers are targeting internet-exposed industrial controllers used in critical infrastructure, particularly Rockwell Allen Bradley PLCs. The attacks have reportedly been active since last month and involve manipulating operational data and extracting system files, causing disruptions across sectors like energy and water. Aside from the fact that hacking into a Venetian water pump sounds like the plot of a James Bond movie, it doesn't seem like we're anywhere close to securing critical infrastructure, at least based on this. Andrew, given the stakes at play with these types of systems, I'm curious, what's the path forward here look like?
We're not any closer to securing IT, let alone OT, is the short answer of that.
Okay.
Do I have the answer? No, absolutely don't. I think, I mentioned right of boom, right? I worked in that industry for a number of years in a research project with the Department of Energy. It's not an easy problem to solve. There are so many things involved. The economics of it and the motivations of it are crazy. There are single source vendors that are in play throughout the entire industry who rely on machines running for 20 years untouched, kind of things that we continuously see. There's room for growth and fix, let's say that, but I don't see the silver bullet anytime soon.
Eduardo,
you got me at
get in there.
$600. I will lose that guessing game. Like I didn't know this cost of entry has gone so low, right? Like for root access to a flood infrastructure, like Venice. You mentioned Venice, right? Yeah. So Yeah. So
Thinking City,
I will
notably.
say critical. I agree with Andrew here. Like critical infrastructure, it's underdefended. I think it's it happens even in the OT side, like the manufacturing and let's segment it and then we're safe, right? I think it's underdefended, overexposed in many cases, and these threat actors are actively targeting these right for the peaking type of attacks, right? You have activists to nation states. In this case, internet exposed industrial control systems are always going to be critical and after under acknowledged from a liability point of view. So the Venice Bridge in this case, and anything that happens, there were some cease advisory that came out, and with limited exposure assumptions in the OT environments are probably frequently wrong.
Well, I mean, is it just there is a lead time, right? To we spent the capital expenditure here on all this OT stuff. We for 20 Andrew, to your point, we're expecting this all to run for decades. At a certain point, does that reach the point of the incentives all line up, right? To be like, that model just doesn't work anymore, and because we have this huge lead time with kind of the financial models that are involved here, is this just almost a generational thing where the next rev we're seeing of OT investment has to change, or does it almost move too slow to react to this kind of stuff? I'm curious.
Let me then give you kind of one insight, which was I was speaking to a utility and I had asked them, like, here's your substation. I can see it. Why is there this huge space next to it? I don't understand. Is it just for like maybe security in case things go boom? And they're like, no, when you build a substation, you double the size because when you want to upgrade, you build a new substation next to it and you cut over. And so it's that mentality, right, that changes the way you're thinking about how the OT industry functions, which is much different from like our kind of more traditional IT infrastructure where it's just like, boom, 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 you're upgrading every day and deploying 10 times a day kind of thing. You have to remember they highly regard safety and uptime as the most important things. And they know that if things go wrong, people literally can die when OT systems do bad things. And so they're going to go after this stability as opposed to always necessarily patching the upgrade because there's a potential IT-related security issue going on. They would rather say, let's keep my uptime and safety going. Right?
Yeah, I think in one of your previous, I think it was this month, on your previous episodes was about the CIA triad, right? Like in this case, they go with the A first, right? So how do you weigh that, the continuity risk of patching or isolating against the security risk of leaving a known targeted system exposed, right? And who really, from our side, who owns that decision in our organization, right? Like if you're going to go personally in your corporation, who owns that, right? I think it's we need to start forcing that network segmentation between IT and OT environments a lot harder, and validate that our OT incident response plan doesn't rely or doesn't route entirely through only the IT only playbooks, right? It's a wake up call, but I think I've been talking about this for 5 years, and it doesn't seem to me moving fast.
Are either of you going to be joining Schmooze in our chat here, going back to your Faraday cage as a result of either of this, or is this another one of we will continue to struggle to deal with this, but deal with it we must,
and we have to continue to live our lives and move on and not worry about it every single second of our day.
You're getting dangerously close to our last segment of the day there, Andrew. We have to move on to our advice spot segment. It's my favorite segment of the show here, where before we close out our stand-up here, what's a piece of advice that you would like to share with our audience? Andrew, I guess I'll start with you here. Anything from the news of the day that inspires you with something to share with our audience?
The thing I'd say is if you don't have any AI agents running yourself at home, like on a test box, go do that this weekend and have fun with it and learn a few things. It's in your face. It's going to be a requirement real soon.
Eduardo, what about you? What advice would you leave our audience with?
I think I alluded to this a little bit earlier, which is probably it's been on my mind lately. Like how do we explain? And start thinking about how do we. I'm getting a lot of questions from the board on the Mythos topic. This topic, everything is AI related in the last few weeks. How do we explain that to the board with the level of knowledge that they have, right? Like start putting your business case in the sense that we used to, how are we exposing our corporations to this new threat landscape, and do we need to shift before we get affected by it, right? Like I will say, my piece of advice is go. It's similar to what Andrew say, but start putting your business case together as it relates to your business, and see where you're going to have to change. I know I've been thinking about, we need to shift from indicators of compromise to behavioral shift, like behavior based threats a lot faster because of all these topics that we actually covered today. So I think the landscape is going to change way a lot faster than it has been in the past. So start thinking about that, put that into your perspective, and put a plan together.
Well, thanks to everybody that got involved in our chat today. Schmooze, Max, Scott, Stuart in the UK. I know it's late there, so thank you for sticking with us. And of course, the big boss man, David Spark, there as well. Always fun to see people in our chat. Remember, you can join him each and every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern on the CISO Series YouTube channel, or shoot us an email, feedback@cisoseries.com. A huge thank you to Andrew Storms with security engineering at Kilo Code, and Eduardo Ortiz, VP and Global Head of Cybersecurity at Tektronic Industries. We will have links to both of your LinkedIn profiles in our show notes. Make sure to give them a follow, like one of their posts, just say hi, I guess is also another option. And you will not regret it. Both are excellent as they were on the show. Thank you once again. Thanks also to our sponsor for today, Conveyor. Remember, you can join us again next Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern for another edition of the Department of No. And we have our last of our Trust Month series on Super Cyber Friday. We're going to be talking all about hacking, trust in security, kind of security within an organizational context. Like, how do we get more trust between the rest of the business and security? Two-way street there. You'll definitely want to check that out. That's going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern next Friday. A whole big day of live streams for the CISO series. To get information on both and to register, head on over to our events page at cisoseries.com. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday, for navigating to this new old time slot that we have here. Really appreciate it. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay secure out there. And for myself, for our glorious producer, Josh, for the big boss man, David Spark, and the rest of the CISO series team, here's wishing you and yours to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to cisoseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.